Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2, that's where we're going to be here this morning, Matthew chapter 2. A few things to note before we get into Matthew chapter 2 here this morning. I have another outline out on the back for you, chapters 5, 6, and 7. It's one outline because chapters 5, 6, and 7 are the Sermon on the Mount. And so instead of outlining each chapter individually, it's one outline of the sermon and then the reaction to the sermon of those three chapters. So it's one outline, same as the other ones, front side 5 through 7, back side questions. If you need chapter 4, please let me know. I went back. You can let me, when we leave here, if you need it and you don't have it, let me know. I'll make some more copies. I made 1 through 4. There's still some of 1, 2, and 3, but 4 is gone. I made the same number of all, so I'm confused by that. But if you need chapter 4, let me know. 5, 6, and 7's out there. There are some folders, empty folders on the back table. Thank Brother Mike Starkey for that. He brought several folders. If somebody wants to put their outlines in one that they don't have a folder out there on the table, he set them out there. You can use those. There's also another outline back there that's got a bunch of blanks. If you haven't picked that up yet, and pick it up as you leave, it won't be hard to catch up. What that is chapter content. The reason it's blank, we're going to fill it out as we go along. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is I may retitle chapters as I go along, working back through them, and so they're there. Just a hint, 5, 6, and 7, just title all of them Sermon on the Mount. They're all separate lines on there. Sermon on the Mount, Sermon on the Mount, Sermon on the Mount. So those are on the back table. I'll go over that chapter content today. What we'll try to do is only do that if we're starting a new chapter or when we're in 5, 6, and 7, depending on how long it takes, we may review it. But instead of going over that, for example, if we don't finish 2 today, there's no need to go back through chapter content on Wednesday because we haven't added anything new yet because we'll mention again the theme for chapter 2. So those are on the back table if you want to pick those up for our studies. We're ready for chapter 2. Before we get into chapter 2, just a reminder, the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, the title is Jesus is the Messiah of the Old Testament. Matthew's writing to a Jewish audience, and so Matthew's focus is on Old Testament prophecy and the fulfillment of it. 11 times there is a statement made that it might be fulfilled, then was fulfilled, or some equivalent. I think 9 of those 11, it is the exact phrase that it might be fulfilled if you're using a New King James. Then was fulfilled once, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, but it's the same purpose behind the statement. And that's just that statement. There's other statements, even here in the chapter, where a passage may be referenced that statement's not made, but is quoted, as Matthew's using the Old Testament to prove the point. This is the outline we're following of the book. It's Faith Life Study Bible's outline. 3 points. Prelude to Jesus' ministry, 1:1 to 4:16. Jesus' ministry in Galilee in 4:17 to 16:20. And Jesus in Jerusalem, 16:21 through 28:20. Somewhat simplified outline. They're probably more detailed we could break down. This makes it a little bit simpler for us in following the book. Our chapter content. We only have 1 chapter so far that we've covered, so there's only 1 blank to fill out if you have the blank sheet. That's number 1. Chapter 1 is the genealogy and birth of the Messiah. As we start to add more chapters, I'll leave this blank and we'll fill it out as we go, and I'll ask through the chapters as we review. But for now, we just have the 1 chapter. This chart here, we haven't looked at this chart yet, but what this chart here is a breakdown of the 7 periods of the life of Christ. You've probably seen similar breakdowns before, breaking the life of Christ down into 7 periods. There's the preparation, the beginning of ministry, the great Galilean ministry, what's known as the period of retirement. It's a very short time frame where Jesus isn't doing the preaching at the time, but mostly conversing with the disciples. Then there's the close of ministry, the end of his ministry. There's the last week there in Jerusalem, and then there is the resurrection days. I was going to put all the verses on there for us, but it was not going to fit. And so I'll give you those as we go along. We're in the period of preparation. I'll give them to you if you want to jot those down as we go. If you want them otherwise, I can give them for you. I've got them all. I can give you a sheet with those if you are so interested. But the preparation period, Matthew 1, 1 through 3:12, Luke 1, 1 through 3:38, and John 1, 1 to 18. That's the outline of the preparation period. Mark doesn't really have that, as we're dealing very briefly with John, mostly beginning with Jesus' ministry, as is dealt with in the Gospel of Mark. Getting into Matthew chapter 2 now. Matthew 2, we simply title The Messiah as a Child. You can go ahead. If you have your sheet of paper, that is the blank one with chapter content. Whatever this chapter is right here that we put on the board when we introduce the chapter, that's your chapter title we'll use for review. So Matthew 2, The Messiah as a Child. I'll give you another hint. All the outlines you've got, at the top of the page is a title. That's the same one. The Messiah is mentioned in all of them. I don't think I have him in chapter 7. It's just simply 5 through 7. It's just the Sermon on the Mount. You could title it The Messiah Preaches the Sermon on the Mount for those 3 chapters, it being one sermon. But this chapter is the Messiah as a child. Let's go to question number 1. If you've got your questions with you, they're again on the back side of your outline. So if you have your outline for chapter 2 with you, you flip it over to the other side. There are all of your questions. Question number 1, briefly summarize the chapter. What is this chapter about? Jesus' flight to Egypt. There are really 4 things that we'll outline as dealt with here in the text. So the first one is the wise men visit the Messiah. The second one's the flight to Egypt. The third is Herod seeks to kill the Messiah. And then the final one is the journey to Nazareth, where Jesus comes from Bethlehem to Egypt and Egypt to Nazareth. It fills in the blanks for us. How is he born in Bethlehem and end up back in Nazareth? This fills that for us here in Matthew. Question number 2, what is the key verse of the chapter? Verse 23, and he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. I will say this, it is harder to pick a key verse for this chapter. Some chapters it's real easy to pick a key verse. I think chapter 1, also the book, quite easy. The whole point is about him being the Messiah or the Christ, the Anointed One. Verse 1 introduces that, and the rest is the evidence of it. There are so many different things dealt with in this chapter. We're going back and forth, but we focus on this one because it tells us how he comes to Nazareth, fulfilling a prophecy. More about where that prophecy is found later on. Let's go ahead and get question 3. I'll come back to these prophecies as we move through the chapter, but question 3 lists the prophecies about the Messiah in the chapter. There are 3 about the Messiah. There's a 4th prophecy I'll list as well that's not specifically about him, but about an event surrounding him. What are those 4 prophecies? The first one's found in verse 6. That is a quotation of Micah 5:2. If you write in your Bibles, I have written out next to mine where those prophecies are found. That's Micah 5 and in verse 2. Verse 15, out of Egypt I call my son. That's Hosea 11:1. Now, verse 18 is not about the Messiah. It's of the children killed, but it's an event surrounding the Messiah. And our statement, then was fulfilled, is recorded here. So it's not specifically about Christ, but about events surrounding him. So we note it here. That's from Jeremiah 31:15, about the voice that was heard in Ramah, the lamentation and great mourning. The final one, and I'm not going to deal with this in great detail now. I'll deal with it when we get to verse 23. He shall be called a Nazarene. That's an unknown quotation. Either it is a combination of thoughts of multiple prophets. You take some things that are said and sort of combine it. Here's the conclusion you reach. That happens sometimes. Or it's from a book that we just don't have recorded for us, but it's still an inspired writer. Matthew records it, says it was written. That tells me Matthew writing by inspiration. It's written by an inspired prophet somewhere, even if we don't have record of that for us. Now, let's go to verse 1 through 12. It's our first section. Again, 4 sections to the chapter. The first one, the wise men visit the Messiah. We begin in verse 1 through 2 with wise men coming from the east and journeying to Jerusalem. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who's been born King of the Jews? for we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. There are a number of things to get to here in this section. The first thing I do want to mention here is, as you look at this map here, this is the journey, the birth, flight, and return of Jesus. This is from Manna Bible Maps. You look up Manna Bible Maps. They have all sorts of maps online. You can get access to these. You can get the whole life of Christ for like $7. It's like 10 maps. If you want all those about his journeys and his preaching. This one is the first map, his birth, flight, and return. So, of course, from Nazareth, they come down. Mary and Joseph come down to Bethlehem. We don't have it recorded in Matthew. He does go from Bethlehem to Jerusalem to be presented in the temple, Luke 2, and then back to Bethlehem, which is where he's going to be found here in chapter 1. So, again, he would have been presented in the temple when was necessary. So they went from Bethlehem to Jerusalem and back. That's not where we're focused this morning. We'll get to the latter half where they go down to Egypt, which is depicted over here later. But this arrow right here, the Magi or the wise men come from the east. Where specifically, we don't know. We just know they come to Jerusalem somewhere from the east. It was a common term, by the way, this phrase, Magi or wise men. It does occur in the Septuagint. What's the Septuagint? It is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. In between in that 400 years of silence, when Greek was becoming the common language, and Hebrew was not being spoken quite as much, the Bible was taken from Hebrew, the Old Testament from Hebrew, and translated into Koine Greek that was spoken in the time. Koine just means the word common. So it was translated into the common or Koine Greek. In the Old Testament, in the Septuagint translation of that, the same term occurs in a negative sense, talking about those that were sorcerers, but also in a positive sense, when it talks about Daniel in Daniel chapter 5 being of the wise men. There in Daniel 5, the word chosen is the word for Magi or wise men as used here in the book of Matthew. So, we'll get to this here more in a moment, but as we talk about these wise men, a few things we want to note, and I'll get to this more in a minute. Well, I'm not going to jump ahead and we'll come back. How many wise men were there? We'll get to the second half in a minute. How many were there? We don't know. When you see the Christmas depictions, you're going to see 3. Why do we see 3? They bring 3 gifts. There could have been 2 of them that brought 3 gifts. There could have been 25 of them that brought 3 gifts. I know there was at least 2. That's all I know. Because they were wise men. What exactly are these wise men or magi? Well, it could simply be that they were just well-educated individuals. It is used in Daniel 5 of those who were sort of the wise men of Babylon. But I think more likely, this term was often used in this time frame to refer to one who studied astrology. Which makes sense because what do the wise men see? A star, and they follow the star. So, if your job is astrology and you're following the stars and a star appears that you don't normally see, you would know it if you're one that is studying it. What is it about this star that causes them to come to Jesus and follow it? I don't know. But there was something about it, whether it was their familiarity with prophecy. Some have said they were Gentiles. Perhaps they were. We don't know. But there was something about it that caused them to follow it. And verse 2, they followed it saying, coming to Jerusalem and asking, where is he who's been born King of the Jews? We have seen his star in the east. Something about it told them this was leading them to the King of the Jews. Again, what specifically, we don't know, but something was. Yes, they called it his star, so there was something about it that to them indicated, again, what is it? We don't know. We don't have to know. If we did, God would have told us, but there was something that to them indicated it, and so they followed it. Yes?
These Herods were Herod. Is that kind of a generic name for several men? Because in Acts 10, we see, Acts 12, Herod had James killed, was going to kill Peter, Joe's intervention from God, and then I believe it was Herod that had his brother's wife. I mean, all these Herods seem like wickedness is the only thing that's associated with them. But I was thinking I'd studied at one time that Herod was a term that was applied to different men. Is that correct?
Yes. So when we talk about this Herod, this would be, I believe, Herod the Great, as he's often referred to. That's this Herod. His son that comes to reign later in the chapter, that's also Herod. Again, the book of Acts, as you mentioned, Herod. Think about it from a couple other standpoints. In Egypt, they're Pharaoh. It didn't matter who. When Moses fled, he fled from Pharaoh. When Moses came back, he came to Pharaoh. It wasn't Pharaoh Senior and Junior and the third and the fourth. It was just Pharaoh. Think about in Rome too. These would be your providential kings. But your emperor, your king over all the empire, is called Caesar. Nero was known as Caesar. So was Domitian. You have Julius Caesar. They were often just referred to simply as Caesar as a title there. So the same with Herod. It is a generic term just referring to the one that would be over this region. So this Herod here, they come to him, verse 3, and when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So they said to him, I'm in verse 5 now, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time that star appeared, and he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search carefully for the young child, and when you found him, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also. So, Herod seeks to find the Messiah. Here's what happens. Herod hears in verse 3, and he's troubled, and so is all Jerusalem with him, king of the Jews. Who's this king of the Jews? Is he coming for my throne? That seems to be Herod's mindset. What Herod then does is he gathers the chief priests and the scribes together to inquire about this prophecy. So he gathers these religious leaders to inquire of where the Christ was to be born. They go back and they find a prophecy. I'll talk more about that prophecy in a minute. And discover the prophecies about the city of Bethlehem. So then in 7 and 8, he secretly summons the wise men and sends them to Bethlehem and says, when you get there, come back, let me know where he is, because I want to go worship him also. Except we find out as we go later in the text, he's lying to them. So, as we go through this here, again, he calls the chief priests and scribes of the people together to inquire where the Christ was to be born. And then verse 6 is a quotation of Micah 5:2. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel, whose going forth are from old, from everlasting. And so if you're writing in your Bible, next to verse 6, write Micah 5, and in verse 2, that is the prophecy quoted here. Now, after this, the wise men in 9 to 11 come to Jesus, verse 9. When they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So, coming back to our map here, we have the Magi, or the wise men, come from the east to Jerusalem. At Jerusalem, they inquire, where is he who's born king of the Jews? Then Herod calls the chief priests and scribes, says they found out it's going to be in Bethlehem based off this prophecy, and sends them to basically do the legwork for him. You find him, come tell me where he is, and then I don't have to do as much work to find him. And so they leave from Jerusalem here and come to Bethlehem. Question 4, we've answered the first part. We'll get to the second part now. We said how many wise men were there? We don't know, but what did they bring? 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Frankincense and myrrh, we're not as familiar with. It was some type of sort of oil that would be very good, very expensive and a good gift, not for Jesus as much as a gift to Joseph and Mary. Verse 12 then. Verse 12 says, Then, being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their own country another way. Subpoint D, the wise men are warned not to return to Herod, and the reason we'll get to in verse 16. Verse 13 now through 15, the Messiah and his family flee to Egypt. So verse 13 beginning, Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I bring you word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt I called my son. So, question number 5, where did Joseph, Mary, and Jesus flee to? To Egypt. Yes.
Mode of travel and what I read, the dangers associated with this. This was a sacrificial thing on Joseph's part. You know what I mean? Biologically, it wasn't his son, but yet he was heeding all these commands of God. And like I said, they didn't hop into a, comfortable vehicle like we did. So, it was sacrificial even on his part.
Absolutely. We'll get to the map here in a minute that shows, again, I keep coming back to the same map that depicts the journeys, that will show us it's a long journey. I mean, the map runs off, and the people that did the map had to zoom in on Egypt and put it in the corner to let you know, because it's such a long journey to depict everything. The angel tells Joseph to flee to Egypt in 13 to 14. So they do, and this is in fulfillment of prophecy. Out of Egypt I called my son, verse 15. I'll get to the prophecy in a minute, but I want to note a few things here. Jesus is likely about 6 months old, is most of the estimates. Some have him a little older, a little younger. He's probably about 6 months old. That does have to take some guesswork, some educated guesswork, but some guesswork in part. We get that from some information we get to in a minute about Herod's time frame, and I'll explain that more when we get to Herod's time frame for the age to kill in a minute. It is likely they spent 1 to 2 years in Egypt. You may find somebody that says they may have spent 6 months, and when Jesus was about a year, they went back. Somebody else may say they spent around 3 years. I don't care how long it was in terms of time, because that's not important. I bring it up for this reason. It wasn't like they went down there and stayed a week or two and then they were okay to go back. It also wasn't like Jesus spent his whole childhood here. He does get raised in Nazareth. They're familiar with him. But it does seem they spent a year or two, give or take, in Egypt. Verse 15, again, our prophecy, out of Egypt I called my son. Hosea 11:1 is what is quoted there. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Again, a dual prophecy. Or in Hosea, it's a reference to the fact that God called the Israelites out of Egypt, but is also applied to Jesus. He was called out of Egypt as well. Yes?
This has to bring memories of Moses when they sought to kill the young children back in that day. And then God had a bigger plan, as he did with Jesus. Moses was the physical deliverer of the Israelites out of Egyptian bondage. Christ is our deliverer out of sin and death. And I mean, this in my mind, it rings very familiar to those things that happened to Moses.
You're right, in a parallel there, but also it's the opposite journey. Moses left and went towards the east. He went towards Sinai, where he would have been when he fled, as he was about 40. But they're fleeing to Egypt, so the opposite in terms of where they're going. But you're right, some parallels there between Jesus and Moses. And ultimately, he's called out of Egypt, just like the children of Israel were that Moses delivered. Again, depicting that here on the map, they go from Bethlehem down here. It goes off the map. This is a zoomed out depiction, Bethlehem down to Egypt. This here's a scale of about 100 miles, so you're looking at probably 200. It looks like maybe 250 miles or so, give or take. It's hard to tell exactly, but it wasn't a short journey. 100 miles today, if you're driving interstate, you can be there in a little over an hour and a half. If you're driving back roads, it's a little bit longer. But we could go 100 miles in a day, and it's not a problem. It was much different back then. Verse 16, Herod seeks to kill the Messiah, 16 to 18. When Herod saw that he'd been deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry. And he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and in all its districts for 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. Then was fulfilled that was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because they are no more. Question number 6, what did Herod do? He had the children killed. There's a textual discrepancy. Your translation may say children. New King James says male children. It's male. I think the evidence is just male children. How many? I don't know. The estimates range from about 1,000 to 20,000. But from a historical standpoint, outside of the scriptures, from a historical standpoint, this event's not recorded. So whatever it is, while significant because children were killed, it wasn't considered a significant enough event that from a secular historical standpoint it was recorded. So, but we know there were several killed. Now, what about this time frame? Herod kills all the male children who are in Bethlehem 2 years and under. Why 2 years and under? Well, this is where we get our estimate that Jesus is probably around 6 months old. Because when we think 2 years old, for example, we say Gracie's a year old. She's actually a year and a half. She's 18 months this month. But we would say she's 1 year old because she had her first birthday after 12 months, right? That's how we count time. To the Jews, you were 2 after you were 12 months because you've lived 1 year. Now you're in your second year of living. That's how they counted time. So a 12-month-old is 2 according to the Jews. So where do we come up with 6 months approximately? If you take the time, and I think this is where Herod's trying to be guarantee, if you will, that he gets the Messiah, he goes through this time frame of about 2 years old. So again, 12 months or so, living in their second year. If you take 6 months, which is the approximate age Jesus is, and say the star appeared earlier than before he's born, then maybe it appeared as early as 9 months before, then you estimate somewhere around a year. That's where he would have got his time frame. He's using whenever they first saw the star. When did the star appear? We don't know. But to be safe, in his mind, he's going back to 2 years. He's killing the children who are 2 years and under. 17 to 18 then is the prophecy. 18 about the voice in Ramah. That's Jeremiah 31:15. Thus says the Lord, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children because they are no more. It's actually used in Jeremiah 31 of the exile, those that are taking off in the captivity, but it is taken and applied here to the killing of the children. Again, there are prophecies and statements made by the prophets that can have two fulfillments, a short term and a long term. It has reference immediately in Jeremiah 31 to those in the captivity at that time, going to the exile, but it has ultimately application to this event in Matthew 2. Yes?
God had it recorded in Proverbs 6 that he hates the hands of those that shed innocent blood, and that's true today too.
Yes, absolutely. And what Herod did is unfortunately not unlike what our society does, though it's before the child is born in our society today. Let's go to verse 19 now, 19 to 23. The Messiah goes to Nazareth. We'll read 19 to 23 and then come back and break it down. Now when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the young child's life are dead. Then he arose, took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea instead of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned by God in a dream, he turned aside into the region of Galilee, and he came and dwelled in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. So they go to leave from Egypt. And where do they ultimately go, verse 23? Question 7. They go to Nazareth, which is why we refer to Jesus as Jesus of Nazareth. That's where he grew up. The journey home to Galilee. Now again, this is where they're from, this area, and they've come down because Joseph's originally from the area of Bethlehem. They have to travel down to Bethlehem, according to Luke, because of a census. They stay there in Bethlehem. Then they leave Bethlehem for Egypt because Herod's seeking to kill Jesus. Herod dies. They're coming back, but they realize his son is reigning in his place. He might be a lot like his father, so they go back to Nazareth instead of back to the region of Judea. So as we go through this, again, they come to Nazareth. Verse 23, and he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. We've asked this question. I mentioned this already a few times. I'll mention it again. This is an unknown quotation. Now, if your Bible has footnotes, you may have a footnote, mine does, for the verse that notes Judges 13:5. But that is not a prophecy. That's talking about taking a Nazirite vow in Judges chapter 13. Samson taking a Nazarite vow. He shall be called a Nazarene because he took the Nazarite vow. Has nothing to do with where he was from. Has nothing to do there with Christ. It's not a direct quotation from there. So, what prophet is this? We don't know, again, but we know it's an inspired writer because Matthew's writing by inspiration, and he says it was fulfilled that was written. This, again, is the statement that occurs time and time again. I forgot to note these as we went through. If you are noting these, I have them noted in my Bible as we're going through them, that it might be fulfilled or some equivalent. There are 11 occasions. Again, you may think there's 8, or not 8. You may think there's 10 because you don't want to count this one because you don't know who's quoted from. I count it. He's quoting from somebody that's inspired. You may have a critical text Bible that doesn't include one of the later ones, in which case you may say there's 9. But if you're noting it down and you're counting this one and you're counting the last one, if you have a majority text or a critical text Bible, not Texas Receptus Bible, King James, New King James, it is included. In verse 15 is 2 of 11, that it might be fulfilled. In verse 17 is the third one, then was fulfilled. Not the exact same phrase, but the same meaning behind the phrase, then was fulfilled. And then if you're counting it, verse 23 is 4 of 11. Again, if you're not counting it, then it doesn't count. That's of 10. And if you're not counting the last one, that's of 9. I count all of them, so it's of 11, yes.
I think it's Peter in early Acts says that Jesus did all these things, many infallible proofs. So we have all these prophecies plus the miracles that Jesus worked. That should have solidified their mind that this truly was the Messiah prophesied because of the fulfillment of these, as well as those miracles that he did.
Absolutely. And again, we'll get some of those miracles and evidence of the prophecies as we move along in our study. Lord willing, we'll pick up and study chapter 3 on Wednesday.